Tony Blair was branded beyond parody last night after he called for controls on immigration and membership of the European Union. The former Labour leader, who as PM threw open the doors to Eastern European migrants, claimed the UK could take back control over migration without leaving the Brussels bloc. Saying he had a renewed sense of mission, Mr. Blair appealed to MPs to resist Brexit from inside Parliament, even though he accepted the public's view had not changed since the decisive vote to leave the EU. Mr. Blair wrote in the Sunday Times yesterday, "There is no diversion possible from Brexit without addressing the grievances which gave rise to it. Paradoxically, we have to respect the referendum vote to change it." And in a startling admission, he accepted that EU migration had resulted in wages dropping for low-skilled, low-paid workers. Immigration Minister Brandon Lewis said, "Comments by Tony Blair this weekend are beyond parody in light of his actions as Prime Minister." And Sir Michael Fallon said that Mr. Blair, who has earned millions as a consultant for foreign regimes since leaving N010, should get over the referendum. The Defence Secretary said the former Prime Minister's epiphany on migrants was a bit late now, joking, "I'm not sure where he's been." Well, we know where he's been travelling the world. A paper published yesterday by Mr. Blair's Institute for Global Change argued Britain should ask Brussels for an emergency brake on the number of EU nationals, and said those who did arrive in the UK should be forced to register. It suggested refusing to offer healthcare to unemployed EU migrants, slashing child benefit levels for those who sent the money to their home nations, and letting universities and RMS give Britain's preferential treatment. Mr. Blair argued circumstances were different to 13 years ago, when he rejected controls on migrants from countries including Poland and Lithuania. But he also claimed that Britain actually needs most of those EU migrants. In an apparently coordinated approach, a close ally of Mr. Blair argued for EU leaders to make Britain an offer on migration. Former Labour Minister Lord Adonis wrote in The Observer that, if the UK were able to stay in the EU but control immigration, a second referendum can be won. He said the House of Lords could attach an amendment to Brexit legislation to force another referendum. But critics said Mr. Blair's proposals either breached EU law, would not affect immigration, or had been tried by David Cameron as part of his renegotiation ahead of the vote in June last year. Mr. Cameron's former spin chief Sir Craig Oliver, one of the leaders of the Remain campaign, said, "Before, during and after the renegotiation, Merkel was clear with David Cameron, no significant change to freedom of movement." Pro-Brexit Tory MP John Redwood described the prospect of renegotiation as a fantasy which ignored Mr. Cameron's failure to change EU policies. "It is most disappointing that a man who gained the top political office by democratic means now has such a scorn for the wishes of the people," he added. Sir Michael told the BBC's Andrew Marr show, "The country wants proper controls over immigration. We've seen that in election after election, and we saw that in the referendum last year. The country's taken its decision." Even fervent Remainers dismissed Mr. Blair's claims. Former Chancellor Ken Clarke told Sky News he thought it was inevitable that Britain would leave the EU. Mr. Blair told the Andrew Marr show there were ways of controlling European immigration that don't mean you have to do Brexit. He said each MP had to look at this decision in a different category from the normal decision where you obey the party whip, adding, "This is a decision that really changes the destiny of this country."